Hey everybody, this is Bill Young of ShopBot Tools, and in these times of social distancing, we're thinking this might be a way that doing an online conversation, discussion, training, whatever, might be a good way to sort of reduce the distance a little bit. The first half of my working life, I was a boat carpenter. I live on the eastern shore of Virginia, which is the little part that hangs down from Delaware and Maryland. And I repaired wooden work boats, did a little bit of boat building, mostly just sort of putting odd-shaped pieces of wood in odd-shaped holes in boats. And about 25 years ago, I heard about this machine called the ShopBot that Ted Hall was creating. And at that time, I was making boat kits, and I thought that this might be a whole lot easier than trying to accurately cut a template and then duplicate it with a router. The templates were hanging everywhere in my shop. It took forever to sort of cut it oversized and shape and sand to the line to get it as accurate as I could. So I got in touch with him and kept up with the development, and when the time came for him to make it public, he offered me the opportunity to design and build a boat for his mother-in-law in trade for I think the number 2 ShopBot. And the design criteria was that it had to be a way to build a boat that was hard to do traditionally and easier to do digitally. So I designed this little ultralight lap strike double paddle canoe called the Quick Lap Canoe that created some step scarves for making long panels out of shorter pieces, a way to sort of rivet it together with zip ties and then weld it with epoxy so that it kind of became the shape of the boat that it wanted to be. And then made the files online, and they've been continuously online since. It's been 20-some years. In the early days, when we first did it, there wasn't enough internet and access and bandwidth for people to be able to download the files. So they would send us call us or send us a letter or send us a message, and we would burn it onto a floppy disk and mail it to them. So the files, the instructions, and everything had to fit in 1.44 megs, and it's still that size. So if you download it now, you could burn the files to a floppy disk if you wanted. So I continued working on boats and using the ShopBot for cutting boat kits and making boat parts and a little bit of furniture and a little bit of kind of unusual things. And after a while, ShopBot offered me a job. I spend 7 days a week in my shop here. It's an old agricultural building, 4,000 square feet. This Eastern Shore is a funny place. It's by nature socially distanced. You know everybody. Sometimes I'll come to work all day by myself, go home, see my wife, and my wife will be the only person I'll interact with during the day if it isn't by email or something. The only person I'll see face to face. So it's been awfully interesting to watch the world changing with the coronavirus. And one of the things that's directly affected me and ShopBot is that events that we're working on, that we were planning on going to, have been canceled or postponed. Some are events that we set up, the ShopBot camps, ShopBot training we're trying to deal with. There's a lot of things where you just don't want to get large numbers of people together. And all these things will eventually resolve. But the other is events that we go to that are other people's events. One that I had been working on was the USITT show, which was in the Theater Technology Show. It's going to be in Houston in another week or two, and it's been postponed. But I did a couple of projects for our booth and to show off sort of the technology that we can offer. We sell a lot of tools to theater groups, both private theater groups and university theater. So there were two things that the marketing folks asked me if I could do. One was to make a TARDIS, the Doctor Who structure, that could be used for a photo opportunity. So it's kind of the front half of a TARDIS, so it's kind of 4 foot by 2 foot, with a doorway that people could stand in and have their picture taken. And I didn't know anything about TARDISes. I'm not a Doctor Who, particularly a Doctor Who fan. But my friend Brian Moran, one of the founders of Vectric, had made a small TARDIS at the San Francisco Bay Area Maker Faire years ago in our booth. Vectric was sharing a booth with us, and he'd made a little one out of MDF. So I kind of worked my way through the Vectric pipeline until Brian sent me some files, and the files included the files for the small MDF one that I ended up making and turned it into a cookie jar, but also the design files in PDFs for the full-size TARDIS. And it turns out there's lots of different variations of the TARDIS. But I picked one that I thought looked right and modified it a little bit. I wanted to make sure, I wanted one open door and one closed door. It needed to be really sturdy. It needed to be instantly recognizable as a TARDIS without being too fussy about getting the details right. It didn't have to be a prescription TARDIS, just a iconic TARDIS. So I made that, and also made a copy of the small one Brian did with a little bit of modification. Directly used his files for that, but made the lid removable so it would be a cookie jar. And the other thing they were interested in was they wanted to show some indexer turning. So, I've done a handful of different turning things, and I really kind of enjoy it. It's an interesting process, and it lets you do something that you couldn't do on a lathe. You can do cross-hatching. I do a lot of fat-leaded carpenter's pencils, and you can do sort of things that would be very, very hard to do, carve shapes, carve designs in them and all. But they wanted Harry Potter wands, and I knew nothing about Harry Potter. I got to be the only person in the world that hasn't read the Harry Potter books. I had seen bits and pieces of the movies, and I'm actually watching the movies now just to understand it a little better. But I found the design. I'm not a 3D modeler. I couldn't take a picture of very intricate wand and turn it into a 3D model. It's just not my skill set. I kind of generally make stuff, out of sheets of plywood, sheets of whatever. So I found on Thingiverse, I found all kinds of models for Harry Potter wands. And I picked a couple that would be real hard to do on a lathe, or nearly impossible to do on a lathe, that require a lot of hand carving, but would work really well with on a CNC indexer. So I made 5 of them, and they turned out really pretty neat. I started with some hardwood dowels that I found at Woodcraft. I got inch walnut, 7/8 inch walnut, some maple, some cherry, and used these files, toolpathed them. I learned a trick from Becky Jeremy at Vectric. I was trying to figure out how to make what was functionally a tab on the end of each piece to hold it in place so that you didn't, at the end, cut it loose and have it fall out. And she taught me a little trick with using the Z-plane to create just a little sort of handle on either end. It worked really well. Next time I'll talk about, a handful of other projects. I've done a lot of edge machining, dovetails for decorative dovetails, made a lot of furniture, structures. I'm one of the founders of the Shelter 2.0 project. So it's just kind of random. So if you have questions or ideas, send me an email at billyoung@shopbottools.com, and I'll see what I can do to either answer them or find the person that knows the answer. Take care.